Hello everybody and welcome to the United Stands. Have we got a show for you here? Get your comments in because we've got 3 things to blow the doors off. We're doing a preview for the Newcastle game, which is massive, as you can see, in the race for 6th, 7th or 8th. What do you want? Do you want Conference League football or nothing? We'll talk about that. Will we see any United players returning from injury? We've also got an absolutely incredible story coming out today from the Manchester Evening News. We're going to be talking about Jadon Sancho in a different way and also potentially exposing where some of these leaks come from, I guess. But look, absolutely amazing. I mean, I almost feel like I'm living in a parallel universe sometimes. And apparently fan content is toxic. I wish people would wake up to the reality that the mainstream has always been the toxic one all my lifetime. Turnips on people's heads, setting agendas that suit them and the people that run these things who don't even really like football. We see it all the time, and yet apparently it's fan content that's toxic. When fan content at its very core is about Manchester United or whatever club they do it for doing well. Ultimately, we want to do well. We set the standards. Sometimes we set the standards a bit high. Sometimes we overreact in relation to those standards, but it comes from a place of support. Where does this shit come from? So, story from the Manchester Evening News today. Several Manchester United players share Rasmus Højlund concern amid reluctance to pass to him. A number of Manchester United players remain unconvinced by Rasmus Højlund and are reluctant to pass the ball to him. A United squad member told a confidant that certain players are seeking alternative solutions in the final third due to Højlund's lean spell in front of goal. I can't believe this has gone out from the Manchester Evening News. Well, I can. I think you can all guess which journalist it is. I mean, at this point, I'm loath to even mention the name. Disgrace isn't the word. Toxic isn't the word. Agenda may be a word. Bullying, some have said. Stunned is the word I would use. So a United squad member has told a confidant that certain players are seeking alternatives rather than pass to Rasmus. But the headline is several Man United players don't want to pass to Rasmus. So straight away, we go from headline several Man United players don't want to pass to Rasmus to the actual story that a United squad member has told people that they don't want to pass to Rasmus. So straight away, the story is not what it's meant to be. But can I just say this right? Who would leak to the Manchester Evening News for a start? What Man United player is such a prat that they would do that? Then again, with some of our creativity, maybe that's the sort of option they would go for. I don't know. But first of all, I don't believe the leaks. I don't believe them. I genuinely don't believe them. There's plenty of people who do get told stuff and don't put it out there. And I think ultimately at its very core, yet again from this particular outlet and journalist, it's going after a young player again. We are not about this at Manchester United. It was Garnacho a few weeks ago, 19. It's Rasmus now, just turned 21. What are we doing to the future of our football club if we're going to go in and knock the confidence of young players that are meant to be part of our future? I mean, it's not that long ago that we had that iconic, hopefully iconic picture in years to come of Rasmus, Garnacho and Mainu. It's taken a couple of short months for people to start turning on that. Rasmus is far from the finished article. I think from the chat I had with him in January, he would certainly acknowledge that. But it's incredible to me. It's absolutely incredible to me that a story like that would get written. Anybody with the brain would read that and go, so certain United players have decided not to pass to Rasmus because they don't think he's good enough. So are we to assume that these United players that aren't passing to him are the dog's bollocks? I mean, that's the flaw in the story anyway. Ultimately, I think this is an agenda to cause as much trouble for Manchester United as possible. Because if Rasmus and players fall out because of a bollocks story, that impacts United on the pitch, it undermines the manager, and ultimately the press get what they want. I see you. I see it for what it is. It basically is trying to cause trouble in a situation where ex-players and the majority of the fan base actually want to see some stability and building. And you've got these people trying to destabilise that. But let's look at the facts, because we should look at that. And I want to bring Jadon Sancho into this in a moment or two, and we will get onto the preview. But this is obviously very important, and I'm interested what you've got to say about this. Because no doubt some of you will be in the chat now saying, Rasmus, he's not as good as I thought he was. He's not that good. But let me just say this. It's already well established because we've mentioned it on here a lot. Goals, shots to goal ratio, goal conversion. Rasmus is in the top 5 strikers in the Premier League. Rasmus Højlund has had 35 shots in the Premier League this season. Erling Haaland's had 106. That's basically 3 times as many shots. They've both got roughly the same shot conversion of 23%. So Rasmus has had a third of the shots of Haaland, nowhere near the quality of service. I mean, Haaland's got De Bruyne, Grealish, Foden, Doku, Bernardo Silva, Rodri, quality players who are playing in a system where their whole focus is to create good chances. And Haaland's conversion rate is 23%. Rasmus is playing off scraps, absolute scraps, and his goal conversion rate is 23%. I mean, Rasmus won Premier League Player of the Month in February. Premier League Player of the Month in February because he scored a few goals. You go back and look at those goals. They're not clean assists. They're scrappy. They're scrappy goals. Pouncing on mistakes, getting yourself in on a crappy cross. And yet he's got the same goal conversion rate as Erling Haaland. And in the Champions League, he's in the top 5 for goal conversion. Now, admittedly, we're not in the Champions League, but what I looked at on Y-Scout was goal conversion rate for strikers who've played 5 or more games in the Champions League this year. And he is in the top 5 for goal conversion rate. I think he's got a 50% goal conversion rate. I guarantee he's hardly had any shots again. So if we're to believe the Manchester Evening News, which I think is bollocks, Man United players don't want to pass to Rasmus because they don't think he's good enough. And yet, statistically, in the Champions League and in the Premier League, he's got one of the best goal conversion rates in both of those. So if there are United players out there thinking, I don't want to pass to Rasmus because I don't think he's good enough, but the stats say completely the opposite. You don't give him many chances, and when he gets them, he scores as much as a Haaland would, or anybody else in Europe. It doesn't even make any sense. Therefore, I call bollocks. I call complete and utter bollocks. I call blame shifting. I call agenda. Because we've been here before. We've seen it all the time, and it must be called out. Because if Rasmus hadn't scored any goals this season, and he'd had loads of chances, and his goal conversion rate was something like Nunez, who's had 101 shots and has a goal conversion rate of 10%, and Rasmus has had 35 shots with a goal conversion rate of 23%, well, you could moan about it. He's had loads of shots and he's missed them. Oh my God, he's missed another chance. But that doesn't happen. This story is nothing short of causing shit. And it needs calling out. We've got enough to focus on at Man United that are real problems. Things like this are just done to dishevel this team, unsettle this team. And the final thing I will say on this before we move on is, hold on a minute. Was it not Cristiano Ronaldo who wasn't getting service as well? Was it not Cavani who was not getting service? And Martial who was not getting service? Or Marcus Rashford when he played up front, not getting service? When did we christen the number 9 shirt for Manchester United as the graveyard shift? 5 years ago. So we're now being told today by the Manchester Evening News that United players have decided to stop being creative for the striker because they don't rate Rasmus. Horseshit. They've not been creative for 5 years. They're not creative. Factually. So see it for what it is. It's a load of nonsense to try and stir up trouble, create division, create toxicity. And I would say to those United players, and maybe it will filter back, I would say to you, stick together. The reason Man City are good, the reason Arsenal are good, is they stick together. And this team doesn't stick together. And you will never win as an individual. You need to stick together. And what I would also say is what I said to Ben Foster today. If I know how Rasmus Højlund played as a striker at Atalanta, why don't some of our players who actually play with him know that? Yesterday against Arsenal, there was 4 or 5 times where he spun away from Saliba early in the channel for the ball to be played down the side where he will win it first. And he's very good at that, running onto the ball, dribbling with the ball, getting a shot off or looking to bring other people into the play. Why, as a Man United player, would you not play that ball? I saw Dalot ignore it, keep dribbling and losing it. I saw Garnacho ignore it, keep dribbling and lose it. I saw Scott McTominay pass backwards instead of forwards. I even saw Johnny Evans ignore it. Like, play the ball to the player's strengths. It's so simple. Pass the fucking ball. Play as a team. And the thing about Rasmus is he will give it back. He's always been in his short time at United and at Atalanta, he will give the ball back. And you will get the ball back, probably in a better position. Pass the fucking ball. Start playing as a team. And start sitting some of these prats down externally who want to see you fail. It's as simple as that. And also, just on that as well, I want to talk about Sancho. I want to talk about this Newcastle game. But another thing I wanted to bring in here was that last week there was a story from Chris Wheeler in the Daily Mail saying that a source from the dressing room, I think again, had said that things are just as bad now under Ten Hag as they were in the final days of Jose and Ole. Can I just give you some basic detective skills here? If things are as bad now as they were under Jose and Ole, then there's only 2 or 3 players it can be. Because they've got to have been there when Jose and Ole were here. And can I just give you a more lesson as well? I don't need to speak on this. If I speak, well, Mourinho will speak. Jose Mourinho said there's 2 or 3 players at this club now that were there when he wanted to be there and he wanted to sell them. There's only 2 or 3 players that were here between Jose, Ole and Ten Hag. So if somebody's leaking to Chris Wheeler or the Daily Mail that it's as bad as it was then, it's got to be one of those 2 or 3 players that Mourinho wanted to sell. The thing is, this stuff that's coming out is just easy to see what's going on. Also want to just say this as well. On the dressing room, I will talk about the Sancho thing because I think it's a really interesting thing. And then we'll do the Newcastle preview. Cristiano Ronaldo did an interview a couple of years ago talking about the dressing room and saying, basically, we know Ronaldo was never injured. He looked after his body away from work, fitness, diet, absolutely dedicated himself to the sport. Messi is a better natural talent, but what Cristiano Ronaldo got out of his talent was based on ridiculous hard work. The way he trained individually, extra, after, absolutely amazing. In his time at Manchester United, he said it in the interview with Piers Morgan, I wanted to be a role model to that dressing room and help players. And I told them what to do and they didn't listen. I wanted to be a guide to some of those players. Some of them did. A lot of them didn't listen. Ronaldo's not there anymore. When Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the greatest players in the game, is in that dressing room and that dressing room doesn't want to listen, and Ronaldo is gone and a lot of those players are still there, do you think... It's like that song, what would Man United be without Ronaldo? And you play better or worse. Okay, so what would United be without Ronaldo? Worse. What would United be with Ronaldo? Better. And we're actually in a worse situation without Ronaldo. So what do you think the dressing room's like without Ronaldo? Worse. What do you think the dressing room would be like if it still had Ronaldo? Better. Because that dressing room hasn't got anybody of credibility or leadership or, that's trying to grab hold of that dressing room. But I bring it up because Ronaldo said when he was there, people didn't want to listen. So when you are in that dressing room and you're Erik Ten Hag and you look upstairs and you go, I've got no structure and support there. Many managers have been stabbed in the back. And I look in that dressing room and I know it's fragile and it's weak and there's a lot of toxicity in here. Then what Wayne Rooney said yesterday, the manager will fall on the sword, but the players aren't injured. They're not fighting for the club. Toxic mess. And it must be really difficult for a Mainu or a Garnacho or a Rasmus to be, asking for the ball or whatever like that when you've got older players there who have let this club down for a long, long time. And I just think that, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but what I was trying to say really about the Ronaldo thing is that this dressing room is toxic. Not individualistically player-wise, the whole dressing room has been toxic for years. It's infected and it needs a clean out. Whoever the manager is, whoever the owner is, that dressing room has to be cleaned out. I would take every single player out individually and I would absolutely disinfect it. And then I'd send them in one by one again and say, this doesn't get toxic again. And you don't let some people back in. It's as simple as that. You really don't. But going back to the creative issue, because we can now start to come into this Newcastle game, and this is where Sancho comes in. He's not going to play. That's not going to happen. But look at the Premier League. We're playing Newcastle. They're 3 points ahead of us. If we beat them, we're level with Newcastle, but they've got a much better goal difference. So we don't go above them, and we wouldn't go back ahead of Chelsea even if they lose to Brighton in their midweek game. So to have any chance of 6th or 7th, we need to win our last 2 games. One's away at Brighton, and obviously we've got Newcastle at home. Newcastle we'd have to beat, and then they go away to Brentford. So we could potentially, if we beat Newcastle, finish above them if we win our last two. Chelsea away to Brighton, and then home to Bournemouth. So I think Chelsea, if we beat Newcastle, I think Chelsea gets 6th. 7th would be Conference League unless we win the FA Cup and then we go in the Europa League. If we finish 8th and we lose the FA Cup, then we're in no Europe at all. What would you rather get? Let me know in the comments. But my point here is that with the Newcastle game coming up, I actually took the time to watch the Arsenal game again because I disagreed with some people who were being very negative. I heard that Arsenal scored their goal and parked the bus and let us have it, and that's why we had so much possession. I've never heard such bollocks in all my life, which is why I wanted to watch the game again. Arsenal were a deflection away or a dodgy penalty away from losing the league. Arsenal would not sit back and give the ball to Manchester United for the last 20 minutes like they did willingly. For whatever reason, Arsenal couldn't get on the ball and dominate the game yesterday because Man United structurally were a lot better. But in the final third, we were shit. The creativity was rubbish. And you know what? I was thinking about this today. The reason to bring someone in like Michael Olise or Neto is because we need a winger that sole focus really is to think about being creative. I think we'd all agree on that. And it's such a shame that Jadon Sancho didn't take the opportunity at Manchester United. And some might not agree with me on this. Some might say, you know, I don't agree with you on Sancho, Mark. He's had his chance and he wasted it. And in a sense, I do agree with that because ultimately, who's at fault? Is it Solskjaer for buying him? Is it United for spending £75 million? Is it Sancho for not delivering the talent that he clearly has? But when I look at United against Arsenal, and I look at the problems of the last 5 years in relation to creativity, Manchester United have always been, from the Busby Babes to when Sir Alex Ferguson walked, creative down the wing. It's what we are, creative wingers. Steve Coppell, Andrei Kanchelskis, Ryan Giggs, Lee Sharp. You know, these wingers are what we've always been about. Man United have always had creative wingers. Creative wingers. Yes, Ronaldo scored a lot of goals from the wing when he won the Ballon d'Or, but basically creativity. And even Ronaldo was capable of getting assists. People forget that. Cristiano Ronaldo scored a lot, but he created a lot as well. He didn't always think of shooting. So what we have at the moment is a collection of wingers who are, maybe it's the modern game in some ways, but they don't want to create. They don't want to create. And that's what United is. It's our DNA to be creative. So this was going on. This is not a new phenomenon. This was happening under Mourinho. This was happening under Ollie. And it was happening under Rangnick. It's not exclusive to Ten Hag. The graveyard shift of the striker started 5 years ago. Maybe even longer, actually, when I think about it, because 5 years ago wasn't even Mourinho. So we've had this problem for a long time that's not been solved. Our recruitment of wingers has been shit, to be honest with you. And our development of younger wingers, I mean, it'd been interesting what would have happened with Mason Greenwood. If he hadn't have had the issues and not played for 2 years, would Mason Greenwood been a winger that keeps shooting, or would he have become creative? I actually think he would have been another one who shoots. And Rashford's one of those. And Anthony's one of those. Garnacho is still 19. I hope we can change him to be more creative as well as shooting, because I actually think Garnacho will be better as a creative winger than a shooter. I don't think his shooting is as good as a Rashford or a Greenwood. So I hope he will become more creative, and he's only 19. But we haven't got what United need, which is creativity. And it's pointless bringing Sesko in or having Cavani here or Ronaldo or Rasmus or anybody else if you don't create things. And that was why I was so excited about Jadon Sancho. And I look at the Sancho thing and I think, you know what? The recruitment was right. It's such a shame that for whatever reason, in his whole time here, there were issues, obviously, and he's now at Dortmund, but he didn't hit the ground running under Ollie either. He didn't take the opportunity under Ten Hag. But you look at him at Dortmund in that semi-final first leg against PSG in Dortmund, and you look at him at Dortmund before he came to United, where he was even better. And he is exactly what you need. If you could take what Jadon Sancho's potential was at Dortmund and bring him to Man United and deliver, I don't have a problem with the signing. It's just a shame it didn't work. And the reason I'm getting to here is, when you look at Jadon Sancho when he plays well in Germany, and look, Kagawa played well in Germany. There's loads of players that have played well in different leagues and don't transfer to the Premier League. And maybe Sancho never could do that. But at the very core, what we were trying to bring in and why we were so excited is because Jadon Sancho actually, in Dortmund, was always a player that looked for the pass, looked for the cross, looked to be creative. He can score, but it's probably his weakest asset in the final third is actually shooting. It's his creativity, it's his passing and movement, it's his crossing. And we desperately need a player like that. We've been so deprived of it. I don't think some of our fan base realise it. Sancho was probably, profile-wise, a very intelligent signing from Manchester United, and we tried to do it the year before we actually did it. I never had a problem with the Sancho signing. I was very excited about it. He has flopped. There's no point bringing him back. The risks around Sancho are what we already know. But the profile of player and the reason for buying him was actually correct. We're crying out for that type of a winger who gets the ball and knows his job is to pass and to cross and to create. And it's such a shame it didn't work out because we are crying out for that. And because we haven't had it for so very, very long, I don't think people realise what happens when you have an Anthony Gordon, when you have a Michael Elise. You know, when you have these types of wingers who actually create, it's going to be such an eye-opener when we get them. And this is why we need to bring wingers in like that, because the ones we have are fine. I mean, you could play Rashford off the left and Elise off the right. You could play Anthony Gordon off the left and, another, a Greenwood type player off the right. But you've got to have a balance. You've got to have somebody that can put a cross in or be creative, or its focus is to be creative. And we've got too many selfish players in the final third at the moment. And that is why we have a graveyard shift up front. So when I see stuff about, he's not making the right runs, he is. I saw Rasmus make the right run 6 times yesterday against Arsenal and nobody played the pass early. The problem is, I used to play centre-back, I'm sure many of you did. And I'm sure if you've played striker, you'll say the same. When I used to play centre-back and somebody had it on the wing, the one thing I didn't want, or when teams transition from defence to attack, the one thing I hated as a centre-back was the early ball or the early cross. Because that's the thing any footballer will tell you. You're terrified of defensively. You don't want the early pass. Because in the early phase, 9 times out of 10, there's space that a ball can go into, that if that player's read it quicker than you or is quicker than you, they're going to get to. But if they take their time, then you will get yourself in a position where you're the favourite to win the ball. United ignore the early cross and the early pass all the time. And that makes it easier to defend. And that is why we need creative players. Because it's not just about putting a cross in, it's about putting the cross in at the right time. And when you look at Man United yesterday, the reason we weren't putting the cross in a lot is because McTominay and Rasmus were in there, but there's no space for them to attack the 6-yard box. They're static. There's nowhere for them to move. So if the cross comes in, you can't even put a cross into a static front two. I mean, we had a front two a lot, but it would have been too easy for Saliba and Gabriel to win it. You've got to put that cross in early. You've got to put that in where somebody can attack it. And we're terrible at playing the early ball. But it's interesting around Sancho because I think that's the profile of player you need to buy. The next step is to bring the right player in who will deliver consistently and can play in this league. But the profile of player was correct. It just didn't work out. Give me your thoughts on that. Right. Let's show you. Oh God, I feel like this is a marathon, not a sprint. Right, I'm going to show you the league which we've looked at. Newcastle, Man United, if we win, we're level, but they've got a better goal difference. If we then beat Brighton and they don't beat Brentford, we would finish above Newcastle in probably 7th, because I think Chelsea are unlikely not to win one of their last 2 games. Basically, it won't matter if we win our last 2. If Newcastle and Chelsea win their final game, they've got better goal difference. But it would be nice to beat Newcastle, of course it would. And I think that this is the sort of game, if I'm being honest for Ten Hag, I think this is the sort of game that might be problematic if he loses it. I don't want Ten Hag to go. I think we spoke about that many a time. Players need to go first, structure above, etc. But if you get beat by Newcastle, who've got their own injury problems themselves, then I think that there would be a lot of people sort of coming out and going, why are we losing at home to Newcastle? We've got to get some sort of positive result here. I was looking at the Newcastle. I mean, look, they've got some good players, Newcastle. They're more than capable of scoring goals, and we know that. And we know that they can cause us problems. Looking at the team that they put out at the weekend, Dubravka in goal, Livramento, Hall, Gomes, Kraft, Byrne, Longstaff, Anderson, Isak, Murphy and Gordon. Harvey Barnes, Almiron, Joel Linton, Trippier. I mean, they've got a lot more players available than us. I don't know who's going to be available for Man United on Wednesday night, but Newcastle will have a better have a better set of players available across their 11. They've got defenders, they've got midfielders, they've got attackers, and I don't know what's available for United. But this is how I sort of think it might line up. I have a feeling Bruno will be back because he is the sort of player that will want to play, and he must be injured if he's not playing. I don't understand what the problem is with Bruno, but he won't be one of those players Rooney's talking about. I don't see any centre-backs coming back, so I think it'll be Evans and Casemiro, Wan-Bissaka, Dalot and Arna. I think Amrabat has to play. I'm not saying he was amazing. I know he got man of the match against Arsenal, but he did the simple things well. The one thing I would say about Amrabat that was really refreshing was he marked the space he was meant to mark. He protected the centre-backs. He was mobile and he wanted the ball all the time. He may not be Rodri, but he did his job. And I think if Man United players just simplified their job, too many times yesterday, Anthony shooting when he came on from a stupid place. McTominay shooting on his left foot when he can't shoot off his left foot from the edge of the box. We saw it with Garnacho as well. If our front four just simplified their game like Amrabat did, we'd be a better team. Just keep it simple. I don't know whether people are trying to score goals to, get new deals and stay at the club. It's almost like people are just trying to individually impress Ineos. Football's better than that now. Like, beat Newcastle will impress Ineos. If you play if Scott McTominay plays a good pass in behind to Garnacho, who crosses it back and Rasmus scores, football fans are intelligent enough to go back and go, what a pass that was by McTominay, even though he doesn't get the assist. It's almost if players don't realise how educated football fans are now. You don't have to score the goal to get the headline. As a Man United player at the moment, this fan base is crying out for somebody who actually can play a good pass. So if Amrabat switches the play to Dalot, and Dalot knocks it into Garnacho, and Garnacho knocks it into McTominay, and he knocks it into the back post, and we score from Anthony, people will appreciate the Amrabat ball, even though it was 6 passes before the goal. But United don't seem to understand that. And that's why I liked Amrabat against Arsenal, because he just did his job simply. And if we did that more in the front four, we'd be a better team for it. I think Mainu has to play at number 8. Hopefully Bruno's back, and that would be an interesting midfield 3. Bruno, Amrabat and Mainu. Obviously, if Bruno's not back and it's the same team against Arsenal, we're going to struggle with fatigue and we're going to not have any change, any bench again, and I'd expect Newcastle to win. If Rashford's back, I'd still put him on the bench. Garnacho off the left, Rasmus and Anthony. If Ahmad's available, then obviously I'd play him. But look, it's going to be an interesting game, and it's hard to predict. I've got to say, it's hard to predict because we're still stuck in... And I do wonder if those words from Rooney, which I actually said a couple of weeks ago, but obviously it carries way more gravitas when it's an ex-player of Manchester United saying some of those players aren't injured. I just wonder if over the next 48 hours we might see some players saying, I am actually ready now. Because I think some of them are. I think some of those players are ready, and we bloody need them. And if you want to play in the FA Cup final, you've only got 2 games to get ready anyway. You can't all just come back for the Brighton game and play for half an hour. Amrabat, for me, is playing himself into the FA Cup final at the moment. And that's the way it should be. And Ten Hag should be urged to do that from the fan base. If Ahmad did play on Wednesday night and played well, these are the players that if they're playing well, they hold on to the shirt. It's that fear that you need to breed into that team. No player should be walking back. I mean, I think Bruno walks back in because he's the captain and we miss him. But no other player should be walking back into that team. Maybe Luke Shaw because we haven't got a left back. But yeah, we need players to be fighting for positions. Interestingly, I just wanted to have a look at Newcastle's away record this season, and it's not actually that good. They've lost 10 games away from home, Newcastle, this season. They're 15th in the league for their away record. 5 wins, 2 draws, 10 losses. So, it's hard to predict with Manchester United, but I think if we replicate the Newcastle performance, we will draw. Sorry, if we replicate the Arsenal game, we will draw. But if we replicate the Arsenal game and pass in the final third, I think we'll win. Because I think we had enough of the ball and enough of the possession that we should have scored some goals. Now, the message here is pass. Ignore the Manchester Evening News bollocks article and pass the ball. Pass the ball. Simple as that. Pass and move. Pass and move. Look for the early ball as well. I'm telling you, Rasmus makes those runs into the channel. If you give that ball to him and follow the run, you might find you get it back on the edge of the box for a shot anyway. Instead of running forward and trying to shoot from 30 yards, pass. Pass the ball. If it goes to Ahmad or it goes to Garnacho, look at the early cross. Look at it. You know, I think we've got to pass the ball in the final third. I can't believe I'm saying this as a Man United fan, but look at Amrabat's performance against Arsenal. And the reason he was voted man of the match by you is because he simplified his job. He protected his back four. He dropped in between the centre-backs. He always wanted the ball. He was looking to pass the ball forward. He misplaced it a few times, but people didn't care because ultimately he was doing his job. He was being a team player. These players need to be team players. If we play against Man City and we don't play as a team, we'll lose. We'll probably lose anyway, but we've got to play as a team. Play as a fucking team. It's as simple as that. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I've enjoyed venting, I've enjoyed sharing, and I've enjoyed getting my point across. Get yours in below. And look, in relation to that article, it's a shit show. It's an absolute shit show. It shouldn't be going out. It's undermining, and it's not based on any semblance of intelligence at all. This problem and the graveyard shift for Man United has been going on for 5 years. So if certain players aren't passing to Rasmus, who's got one of the best goal conversion rates in Europe, because they don't think he's good enough. Didn't they think Ronaldo was good enough either? Didn't they think Cavani was good enough? Didn't they think Martial was good enough? And yeah, it's not like you're the dog's bollocks yourself. I actually say this. I don't think our wingers are good enough or intelligent enough to put good crosses or good passes into the box. I'll switch it back. I think that's the biggest problem we've had for years. Our wingers aren't actually very good at being creative. And that article talks as if they can put an amazing cross in, but they don't trust somebody to be there. Well, do it. Because, again, I think you misunderstand the intelligence of football fans. We know what a good cross is. If a good cross goes into a good area and no one's on the end of it, that's a very different thing to not even trying it. Get your comments in below. We need these players to play as a team. We need these players to pass. And we need these players to be people who have each other's back and work for each other. We're Manchester United. And everybody wants us to be Manchester divided. Get behind your fellow team member and start playing as a team. Take care, everyone. I'll speak to you on the next one.